Welcome to part 4 on our unit related to prehistory, global prehistory. In this unit, we're going to continue looking at sculpture. We're also going to be moving from the Paleolithic time period, the Old Stone Age, into the Neolithic um, time period, the New Stone Age, and compare and contrast and talk about the characteristics in terms of art that define both those historical periods. So what you're looking at is called a stele, S-T-E-L-E, and this is a kind of vertical stone or monument or marker. It's almost, it's usually just a slab of stone, and we'll see these as well when we look at Greek art, but it's usually used as some sort of marker of some sort. It was found in a small village near Hal in northwest Saudi Arabia. So I have a map here showing you. And this is described as being anthropomorphic, which means human-like. The stele was discovered along with 3 others, and here are some in this region, and we'll talk about the differences between them. I'm going to go back to the original that we were talking about before. Um, so the stele that you see in front of you is very tall. It's tall for a sculpture during this time period. It measures approximately 3 feet high. But it's not just the vertical height that makes this freestanding stone sculpture pure human or anthropomorphic. So I want you to stop and, stop this video for a few minutes and maybe write down some things that make this seem human-like. Try to cornflake it, in this sense, maybe look at the content, where our eye is focused and goes to first, maybe the mood of the piece, also the style, is it realistic? If not, how would you describe the style of this work of art? Okay. So both sides are sculpted. The emphasis is on the front, and particularly the face, chest, and waist. It's a trapezoidal sort of figure. It has this kind of trapezoid head that rests directly on a square shoulders with an outline of a face framing 2 closely spaced eyes and a flattened nose. On the robed figure's torso, a necklace hangs, you can see here, with 2 cords diagonally crossing the body with an awl. And this is a kind of a small pointed tool that was used, attached at the waist. And then a double-bladed dagger hangs from a wide belt that continues around the back. This sculpture is simple, I think, in terms of its style, maybe even abstract, but even it does clearly represent a human figure. And so what could this have functioned as? So it's been described as a stele. It's a vertical stone monument or marker, and often steles will often be inscribed with text, and in this case, a relief carving. So while the middle one was found in the small village in Hal in northwest Saudi Arabia, there have been also some other figures or steles that have also been discovered in this region. So this trio of figures that you see here join a whole slew of more than 60 low relief sculptures in this sort of human form dating from the 4th millennium BCE. And they've been discovered across the Arabian Peninsula in the last 4 decades. And this is a huge territory, okay? And so, this is about 2,300 kilometers stretching from Jordan into the North Yemen in the south. So you can see, again, looking at this map, that this is quite a big territory. So I want you to think about why these figures that were found in remote parts of the region from each other would share similar characteristics. What does that say about what's going on in the environment? What does it say about the people during this time period? So think about it. We see some characteristics they share. It looks like they're all depicting male figures of some sort. In terms of the style, they seem to be very simple, stylized, even abstract. Um, Two of the figures even sort of share a similar costume where they have this belt and some sort of tool or weapon attached to it. So even though they're different, they definitely stylistically are similar in terms of the simple simplicity of the form, um, lack of detail. And so what this is it's evidence of stylistic influence. And it really confirms that during the Neolithic period, people were settling, um, making objects, but also that these tribes, these settled tribes were communicating with one another and were circulating and exchanging ideas across these wide swaths of territory. And so that's something that we can sort of deduct based on, the stylistic influence of these three pieces that were found in, very different areas in Saudi Arabia and Yemen. Also is interesting is that, again, they share this common visual repertoire, the anthropomorphic human-like figure. Again, each stele represents an upright male figure. There are also, the medium is it's relief carving carved in stone. Um, and usually when we think of figural representation or the representation of the human body in a land thought for so long to not have one, when we begin to look at Islamic art, we'll see, and you might have heard that images of humans and animals are forbidden in Islamic religion. But here we see that in the very beginning, um, that we do see this representation of the human form very early on. When we look at Islamic art as well, you're going to see that that's not true. They do depict humans and animals. The difference is that in religious art, there, the depiction of the human figure and animals is not allowed, but in secular art, it's okay. So getting back to the point of the characteristics, the similar characteristics that these three stelae demonstrate, even though there are these apparent visual similarities, it would be a serious error to assume that the meanings and symbols of each stele were everywhere the same. Each religion, village, and tribe is believed to differ in custom and to have developed strong local traditions. To avoid the risk of assigning generalized meanings to distinct anthropomorphic stelae excavated across the Arabian Peninsula, scholars have increasingly focused on local culture in their analysis of material history. In other words, they have looked beyond what appears to be a common style to conduct a fine-grained analysis of each stone's unique context of local social and ritual practices. With this in mind, how are we to interpret the Hal stele, one of the Arabian Peninsula's earliest known artifacts? So we're going to return back to this particular, and this is the one that you have to know for the AP College Board exam. So archaeologists believe that the house stele was probably associated with religious or burial practices and was likely used as a grave marker in an open air sanctuary. While we do not know who produced the stele, just imagine a specialist stone carver working among mobile pastoral herders. We continue to be intrigued by the quality of the carving and its minimalist yet expressive representation of the human figure. Function and context, these markers or gravestones might have been used to honor someone of importance. Others have speculated that they might have been used as rewards for heroic actions as well, because this clearly does look like some sort of warrior with the belt and this sort of double-bladed knife. In any case, the specific stone seems to represent a warrior. All the more reason to believe there were given out as an honor. So not everybody was able to have maybe a gravestone, and this was more of a status symbol as well. These were also the first step in recognizing the individual in society instead of just humans as a collective group. So we're really starting to see this happen in the Neolithic period, this sort of, moving away from depictions of animals and really focusing on this idea of humans and perhaps human identity as well. Move into Asia. What you're looking at now is a form called a Cong, C-O-N-G, and basically it's a kind of tube with a circular intersection and a squarish outer section. So you can see here, it's kind of circle within a square. The outer surface is divided vertically or horizontally, such that the whole defines a hollow cylinder embedded in a partial rectangular block. Proportions vary. A Kong may be squat, like in this one, or it could be, it could be a little bit taller and wider. The outer faces are sometimes decorated with masks or mask-like faces, although generally considered to be a ritual object of some sort. The original function and meaning of the Kong are unknown. Again, we can maybe speculate as to what its function might have been used for. So let's talk about the style a little bit. This piece was carved subtractively and incised from the semi-precious stone of jade. It holds a circular shape inside a square one. There is great precision in the decoration as well, so it's very intricate and thought out. Let's talk about the context a little bit. Even though the people of prehistoric times could not have known that China was the one of the only places in the world to find a surplus of jade, it seems they still placed value on the carved pieces that were made from it. The stone might have held spiritual or symbolic meanings to earlier cultures of China. Many similar Kongs have been found and are thought to perhaps been monetary value, used for trade. Sometimes they might have been used just for ornamental purposes or just reserved for high people, aristocrats in these early societies. So it could have just been, a really expensive, sort of vase. Again, this kind of status of wealth. So we're not completely sure, but based on, the care that's been taken in terms of carving it, the fact that it is jade, we can make some assumptions and theories. We don't know for sure, but these are just theories as to what this piece or artwork is communicating to us. So now we're going to really change gears and we're going to head back to Europe and we're going to be looking at a form of architecture. So this is Stonehenge, and this is probably one of the first examples of architecture that we have. Um, so when we think of Neolithic art, there are massive changes in the way people lived. Um, and because of these changes, the type of art they produced. Neolithic sculpture became bigger in part because people didn't have to carry it around. So when we look at sculptures from the Paleolithic period, they're often very small and portable. Like the Venus of Willendorf that we looked at the very beginning in part one, that was a very small figure that could be held in the palm of your hand because these tribes were migratory. Now that people are settling, growing their own food, domesticating animals, there's this need to maybe build these bigger monuments and really start to build shelters as well. Um, Pottery became more widespread and was used to store food harvested from farms. Also, the discovery of alcohol is important, and these ceramics were used to ferment and store alcohol. And we start to see architecture and interior and exterior decorations within architecture appear. So in short, people began to settle down and begin to live in one place year after year instead of moving and being migratory and living this hunter and gatherer lifestyle. So when people think of the Neolithic area, they often think of Stonehenge, the iconic image of this early era. It dates approximately back to 3000 BCE, and it's set on the Salisbury Plain in England. It's a structure larger and more complex than any built before it in prehistoric Europe. Stonehenge is an example of the cultural advances brought about by the Neolithic Revolution. That's an important concept for you to remember. So this Neolithic Revolution really transformed the way art was made and the kinds of art that were produced. So when you look at this structure, it seems very unlikely that Stonehenge could have been made by earlier Paleolithic nomads. It would have been a waste to invest so much time and energy building a monument in a place to which they might never return or might only return infrequently. After all, the effort to build it was extraordinary. Stonehenge is approximately 320 feet in circumference, and the stones which compose the outer ring weigh as much as 50 tons. The smaller stones weigh as much as 6 tons, and were quarried from as far away as 450 miles. So again, that's a lot of effort to put into something that um, people weren't going to visit or use. The use and meaning of Stonehenge is not clear, but the design, planning, and execution could only have been carried out by a culture in which authority was unquestioned. Here is a culture that was able to rally possibly hundreds of people to perform very hard work for extended periods of time. And so this is another characteristic of the Neolithic era that we're going to be talking about. The site was believed to be built starting with the inner circle first, and then it was sort of built outwards. The stones were kept in a brick-like shape. It is thought so that they could be easily quarried. There's evidence, however, that the tops of the upright stones were tapered slightly to provide the correct perspective. The most important element of the design is still this sort of this post and lintel um, form of architecture. So here you have these two posts, or these two sort of megalith stones, these large stones supporting a horizontal stone known as a lintel on top. And this is known as post and lintel. And the same design has been used throughout history to expand space, and has been used in architecture, and is used very much today. Something else that really pushes us into this idea of the Neolithic art is that there's evidence that Stonehenge is the result of at least 3 phases of construction. So again, this wasn't built in like a day. It was built over many, 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 many years and possibly many generations. So this evidence of this 3-phase construction poses some fascinating questions that we need to ask ourselves. So with the first phase of work, that would have required precision planning and a massive amount of labor. Who planned the henge and who organized whom to work together in its construction? Again, we don't have written records. The remains of Neolithic villages don't really exist because they lie underneath other periods of history, the Bronze Age, the Romans, medieval, and even modern cities. Um, but again, we can kind of assume that there must have been some leaders, or maybe a social class, upper social class, who perhaps convinced or maybe even forced people to work together to build the first phase of Stonehenge. We're not exactly sure though. In the second phase, it's clear that people were buried there. There have been bones that have been found underneath Stonehenge or around Stonehenge, and recent analysis of these bones have revealed that nearly all the burials were of adult males aged 25 to 40 years in good health and with little sign of hard labor or disease. So maybe being buried here was a mark of elite status. And those remains may be well those of some of the first political leaders of Great Britain, an island with a ruling tradition and a system of monarchy that exists today. Um, they also show us that in this era, perhaps there was some means of social distinction. Again, upper class versus lower class, and that this upper status would have been seen as more desirable. Again, these are just theories. These aren't, we're not saying that these are true, but these are some ideas that have been proposed. So here's some other views. Here you really get a better understanding of this post and lintel structure. of architecture I've talked about. So here are these really large or megalithic, that's one of your vocabulary words, stones supporting this sort of horizontal lintel, so post and lintel. And you can see by adding many side by side, it really can expand the space. So again, historians think that the development at Stonehenge perhaps took thousands of years to build and gradually redeveloped with each succeeding generation. Um, One other theory that's also associated with Stonehenge is its relationship with the solar lunar calendar. This was an idea first proposed by scholars in the 18th century who noted that the sunrise of the midsummer solstice is exactly framed by the ends of this horseshoe or sort of hinge design that the stones create. And so it's generally thought that it was designed to be oriented towards sunrise on the longest day of the year. And so this really has to do with our calendar system, and perhaps it was a sort of astrological calendar of some sort. Here's another view of Stonehenge, and you really get that sort of circular kind of hinge or horseshoe shape. Um, And other hinges in southern England have been discovered. One recently discovered in July 2009 is called Blue Hinge excavation site. So it's been buried, and you can see that they're excavating it, but you do start to see the tips of these what are eventually going to be these really large megalithic stones. And so this sort of pattern, this sort of hinge design seems to be a characteristic in terms of architecture in this period and during this and in this part of Europe. Stop here. We have two more pieces to look at in our next unit, so there will be a part 5. And I really do encourage you to watch any of those Khan Academy videos. They're not very long. They're about, sometimes some are only 2 minutes, some are 5 minutes, some are a little bit longer. But I would like you to watch one on Stonehenge because, again, they kind of go in and out of the space and you get more of the sense of the structure. That's hard to see in these two-dimensional images. All right, so stay tuned to part 5.